Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. And if you do like the programming you see here, the musicians and artists that you see on this program, please be sure and hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. A lot of the artists on here maybe aren't household names, but back in the day, they did do, a lot of recordings and have a story to tell. And that's what this is all about. And many of the artists have seen a resurgence of interest lately, including my guest today. And so hopefully we'll connect with some older fans and maybe find some new ones along the way. Terry Ray is an American drummer who would play in a couple of amateur bands prior to turning professional in 1965, replacing Emmett Rhodes in the Palace Guard. Afterwards, he would join Strawberry Alarm Clock, offshoot Strawberry SAC, who would record an album released decades later as Crystal Circus. Confused? Well, not after Terry clears things up in a bit. Terry would then play on the John Phillips produced album by Jamme from 1970. In the early 70s, Mr. Ray drummed with the Flamin' Groovies and played on the demo version of Shake Some Action. In late 73, Terry would be recruited for membership in the Hollywood Stars by none other than Kim Fowley. The band would record 3 albums during the 70s, but only one was released at the time. Thankfully, the other 2 releases would see the light of day in 2013 and 2019. The Hollywood Stars reformed in 2018 and just this year released Starstruck, the first album of new material in almost 50 years. Well, welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Greg. How you doing?
All right, good. Good to see you and meet with you and take a little time to go back in that time capsule.
Yeah, you have it all together there. Yeah, all the info. I don't know what to say. That's it. That's the whole story. Right?
Okay. All right. That's the shortest interview I've ever done. There we go. Okay. Yeah. I try to do my, research, and I've had a couple where I get through and they'll say, I want to correct you on a few things. And it's like, oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. Go back and edit those.
You see a lot of different versions of the story because it's kind of confusing.
Right.
To a lot of people, the amount of recording we did and when they actually came out, the third album was the first album we did and that kind of thing. Right. So
right.
Let's try to straighten that out.
Yeah, try to get that straight. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Vancouver, BC, Canada.
Okay.
I was naturalized in 58. Came from, my mother was English, my dad was Scottish. Okay. We came over here. He was working for, basically he was working for air research, and he was working on, because he had been working on Spitfires back in England during the war, and he came out here and worked for McDonnell Douglas and that kind of thing. And so we became naturalized citizens. We moved down to the South Bay, Manhattan, Hermosa Beach, that area.
Okay, well, yeah, I have one side of my dad's side is Scottish, so we share that heritage there.
You look a little Scottish to me, yeah.
Well, you have fond childhood memories as it regarding hearing music in the household when you were young.
I mean, my brother was my older brother was into the 50s music, so he had 45s in his room. And I'd go and sneak in there actually and play them on his record player, his portable record player. And listen to Little Richard, and I loved Harlem Nocturne. There was some great tracks back then that got me interested in percussion and drumming before I actually knew I was going to be a drummer. So I always go back to those days, and it reminds me of what inspired me back in those days.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, just last night, have you seen the Elvis documentary about the 68 the show that he did in 1968?
No, which one was that? Was that not the one was he on leather?
Yes, the black leather. He was all in black.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Right. And it was weird, because, I talked about it's called the fall and rise of Elvis instead of the rise and fall, the fall and rise. He was so big and huge. And then with Colonel Parker during the, 60s, he did all those beach movies and all those,
Yeah.
His stars started to wane a little bit and selling out. I guess you could say that.
Yeah, that's what it was back then. Yeah, you were selling out if you were too commercial.
You were doing that.
That's
then
lame.
Yeah.
Everything was either hip or lame.
They finally decided to do this, and kickstart maybe his career again. But it was very interesting anyway, very interesting. Well, yeah. We'll talk about either one of your parents. Were they musically inclined at all?
My mother she was like a hostess. She was beautiful. So she was like a hostess. They used her to greet people at the civic symphonies that were in the South Bay.
Okay.
And I would be there too, and I would listen to all the percussion and, for classical stuff. So I would get a lot of classical music influence at the time. The giant timpanis and the big gongs and that kind of stuff that they used.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it was great to see that stuff. They would send me up and I would go run down the middle of the aisle with the flowers and give it to the conductor, at the end of the show, and embarrassed the shit out of me. It was just terrible. But I had to do it. But it was great.
Yeah.
I think there was what's her name? White. What's her name? I can't remember the older lady, but she used to come there all the time. So my mom was into it. She would listen to Mario Lanza, and she'd listen to I don't know what the Can I any of the musical stuff that was out back in those days. She had playing all the time, so it was I had a variation of stuff I was hearing.
Well, that's not bad to be raised on that too, as well as pop music too. You had that classical background. Well, were the drums the first instruments you learned to play?
Yeah, first and only.
Okay.
I didn't end up with anything else. It took me a long time because I was self-taught.
Okay.
Influenced by Ringo, basically. Listening to the early tracks got me interested, because we were playing when I started playing. I was playing surf music, and it was very sort of juvenile drum tracks in comparison to what eventually happened. But you had basic beats that the surf drummers all played, and Wipeout was like the big deal. That was the most interesting thing they ever did. So when Ringo came out, you could hear bass drum patterns, hi-hat patterns, different snare sounds, and overall creativity that you never saw before. So that got me going, and of course the idea of the Beatles and how they represented themselves, how funny they were, and the look they had, got me inspired to get into music somehow. And so I started playing the bongos to the whatever album came out. So Meet the Beatles, I was playing all the songs, bop boom, bop boom, bop boom, bop boom, like that, and back and forth with my hand on the high tenor side, and the lower side of your two bongos. And one was a bass drum, one was a snare, and I was going back and learning what he was playing that way. Yeah. And then eventually ended up with a drum set, and I had to apply what I had done with just my hands to my feet. I had to bring my feet in and figure out how to make that all make sense. So it took a while to figure that all out and get to the place where I was playing, out and in public.
Right. I was going to say you had to have a good sense of rhythm anyway to do that. Definitely. Well, can you recall one of the first 45s or albums that you bought yourself?
Surfing USA was the first album, the Beach Boys.
Okay. All right.
I love that. I was getting into harmony at the time, listening to the harmonies, and that served me well. And I ended up with the Palace Guard because they were a harmony group basically with rock backup. And if you listen to any of their stuff, it's just tons of harmony. And that's basically, they were the first guys that showed me how to sing while I was playing. Because that's a whole other element to keep your rhythm going as you're singing, because sometimes your singing parts are not exactly what you're playing.
Right.
So you have, you're like, it's almost like a syncopation to what you're playing. And so it took a while to get that down and to figure out what parts I was gonna sing too, which was interesting, because sometimes we'd have like 6 parts and I would be in the middle somewhere. And initially it's hard to find your note. And you're trying to hum it while you're playing and trying to feel it in your throat. Well, it's about to happen, let's go for it, And eventually you get confident and have no problem with it. So it just comes natural.
Yeah, kudos to you and all musicians that can play and sing simultaneously.
Thank you.
I've never been a musician or tried to pick up an instrument, but I think it would be hard. I would be too focused on just playing to be able to sing, or vice versa, to be able to do that. Well, talk about some other artists, musicians that were influential early on.
My main influences, are you saying?
Yeah, early before you actually, joined a band. Who else were you into some bands and musicians?
Well, I love the Stones.
Okay.
So, saw them out there. I was in a surf band and they eventually changed their whole thing and they started dressing in the mod look, English look. And we were sort of a clone of the Rolling Stones. And they were the Yellow Pages and they became a house band at the Hullabaloo, just like the Palace Guard. But in the early days, it was a surf band when I was with it. But so we learned everything about the Stones, and all their influences and the blues that it was all coming from. We didn't really know at the beginning that they were playing blues, that they were really a blues band, and we just thought it was a rock and roll band.
Right.
And so that was interesting, and to go back and listen to some of the early blues stuff was really cool. And although it does get to be difficult if you start playing the blues, if you're playing at a club, because you're playing all this really slow stuff and the people want to dance and the club owner's getting crazy,
Yeah. Right.
Just a little bit more upbeat,
Right. Right.
So that was was a strange thing. But I love all the early stuff from England was really all the influence. I love Dave Clark 5, love the Animals.
Right.
Just about anybody you can think of from back in those days.
I happen to have this close by too.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah, which I picked up not long ago. Yeah. Dave Clark 5 is one I don't hear mentioned too often doing these interviews.
Well, he had that lovely, that lovely single stroke roll that everybody loved at the time, and they had such a good sound. It was much different than, like I said, everything else that was happening. And so that was another influence. You got to try to get that riff in. If you were playing music somewhere, you had to get that riff in.
You had to get that in there. Another one. Were you into the Searchers? Another one.
Oh yeah, Searchers, all that stuff. Yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah, they had great.
And it just kept on going. The whole music scene flourished, and it was not only just the music part, but the art of it. The social part of it. I was hanging out in Hollywood for most of the time, and it was a whole theme down there, like a renaissance in that town, and. You could walk down the street and meet musicians up and down the street. You'd meet new guys, and that's basically how you maybe end up playing with some other guys that you knew just from hanging out with them at the Rainbow or at the Whiskey Go-Go, whatever. And then, eventually they would say, hey, I got another bass player. You want to get together and jam sometime? And boom, things would happen like that. It's not that way anymore.
Right.
I mean, a lot more difficult to find those people that are like-minded, unless you're, doing an online thing. Right. But back then it was, you were face to face with somebody, and you were part of the music scene that actually was changing people's lives. It really changed the world.
Right. I won't ever say anything bad about technology like this because it brings you and me together, and
Yeah.
it does bring people from far, places together. But like you said, there's nothing like that being in, the same, area with somebody else, right there with that person,
Mhm.
real
And the thing,
yeah,
you didn't realize it at the time, like, once you've been through it, from
yeah,
the sixties to the, 24.
yeah,
You've seen how many different times the world changes and the scenes change.
yeah,
People now don't realize that the sixties was the beginning of it, and, I mean, in a commercial sense,
right.
where, there were even commercials had rock music doing the background track for them. And when it was happening in the sixties, it made them a little hipper, and you
Right.
might buy their product if they had,
Right.
had some kind of rock music going on in the background, and then if they had a cool striped shirt or something Beatlesque on, it changed the scene, went from
Yeah.
Mantovani to
Right.
Beatles,
Right.
and it was elevator music basically
Yeah.
that you would listen to on the television,
Right.
and the radio was pretty straight too. And then when the Beatles came out and the whole mod scene happened, there was a whole like this underground scene of people that were the hip ones that were influencing everything, and you would see some guy on the street and you just flash him a peace sign, and hey, they flash it back. Oh, he's cool,
Right.
he
Right.
knows what's going on. That's
Right.
all it took.
Right. It was a lifestyle. It was
Yeah,
a
it
life.
was
It was.
either pretty straight or it was super hip, and
Yeah.
you did not want to be lame and you did not want to sell out.
Right. Well, it's interesting. You talk about, of course, I collect a lot of music, and I like some of the older, like you said, from the '60s that put at the end of a track. They have extra tracks on these collections, and they'll have a commercial, like you said, and selling something, and then it'll have the track at the end of the commercial, or at beginning and fade in and then fade out, and that's
Probably
really
had a
cool.
go-go girl in there somewhere.
Yeah, right.
That really made it happen. I mean, wow, a go-go girl.
Right, right, right. Well, were the Scramblers, was that your first band?
It was a kind of funny story because I had just been learning this to play, but I did have a basic idea of the surf stuff already, and I only had one drum. I didn't have a full set. I had an old marching drum that I used to play on. And I'm walking down the street about a half a block from where I lived, and here's this band in a garage trying to play surf music, but the guy that they have on basically it was a silver marching drum, probably 8.5 inch deep. And he was having such a tough time that Rick from the Scramblers, he yells out to the people, and there was a bunch of people out there or just standing around watching them try to do this thing. He says, "Does anybody out there play drums?" I go, "Hey, I do." I don't even know why I said it, but next thing I know, I'm up there trying to play my surf beat to him and the rhythm guitar that he was playing,
Yeah.
and the funky kind of the lead guitar player that they had with them. But I'm trying to play all those surf instrumentals as a garage band. It was really that was the beginning of my whole career, basically. The one guy who ever said, "Yeah, do you guys play? Anyone out there play drums?" That was the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And so we stayed together, and we got more people, and eventually became a surf band, the Scramblers, and went out there and played high schools and that type of thing.
Oh, okay.
Back in
How long were you guys together?
only about a year or so, because eventually, I had to move on. There was nothing really happening there, and I had to keep on going. And that's when we put the Drift Tones together, and then eventually that became the Yellow Pages and all that stuff. So everything, it kept moving pretty quickly. Uh, Danny from the Yellow Pages took me to see the Palace Guard playing at the Hullabaloo with Emmett. And I thought they were amazing. I loved the band. And I didn't know at the time, but I got to go backstage, and Emmett was about to leave to start his band, the Merry-Go-Round. And they gave me a call after, about a week later, after we had met, and said, hey, would you be interested in auditioning to play drums for us? Because Emmett's leaving. And I said, Emmett's leaving? I can't be,
Right.
because it was such an integral part of the band. I said, well, yeah, because I was learning to play drums by playing Beatles songs.
Yeah.
And they were totally into playing top 40, and most of it was Beatles, along with a bunch of other stuff that sort of came in and out. So I went to audition at the Hullabaloo a week after that, and there was about 50 other drummers there spread out all over the place. There were drum sets. You couldn't even get in because there were so many drum sets. And that was a big venue. I don't know if you know, Hullabaloo used to be the Moulin Rouge.
Yeah.
So it was a big venue and a huge revolving stage that one band would revolve on as the other would be playing, leaving. So the music kept on playing constantly. And it was huge. It was the best venue in Hollywood, better than the Whiskey or anything else that was happening at the time. And that whole area was full of drum sets. And then, they started playing, and they were playing a Beatles song. So great. Let me play the parts. I knew all the parts. And so I ended up getting the gig, and it was a big deal because I thought they were so professional when I saw them, and such a leap up from where I was at the time.
Right.
Putting a lot of pressure on myself and wanting to make up, be good for the challenge. I just wanted to come through and keep going and take Emmett's place and be them on the same level that Emmett was, if not better. And all those things were a big challenge at the time, but it worked out well.
Worked out well. Must have been some good chemistry there between you and the other members.
Yeah, they were all French Canadians. So except for Rick, the bass player, he lived out in Torrance, out in the South Bay. So he was one of the first guys that was allowed to have long hair in school. They made him wear a hairnet.
Okay.
When I say long hair, I'm talking, I don't mean like mine got hair, but I'm just touching your ears.
Right.
Was long. I mean, your hair.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to school with your hair.
Right.
Back in those days. And so you had to wear a hairnet. That was what they made you do in PE. If you wanted to have long hair, you had to put a hairnet, which was really the most embarrassing thing you could do, because you're out there with a bunch of jocks, and here you're running around with semi-long hair and a hairnet. Come on.
You said I serve food at lunch in the cafeteria, right?
That's what you look like. You look like a server.
Right.
But I mean, we really had to go through a lot of changes. I mean, I was going to a Catholic school at the time, and they let me stay only because I had a Hollywood contract, because I had to sign a contract to play with the Guard.
Yeah.
And I had to have the long hair, and that was a real problem because when you're in Catholic school, they watch everything you do.
Yeah.
And so if I talk to somebody, even if I was like on the beach, and the father had just driven by and he recognized me with talking to a girl, I would be in the office on Monday.
Right.
Who was the girl you were with that day? Do you have plans on getting married? It was like they were coming right after you. So, because if you're not getting married, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
So they were always trying to straighten me out, and I was like a crazy person to them because the girls in the Catholic school were thinking, who is this guy with the long hair, and they were writing notes about it. But then the sisters would grab the stuff out of the garbage can and say, who is this Terry guy that they're writing about? And then I would be in the office again, it's like, God, I had nothing to do with this.
And you didn't cause that.
The girls would get in trouble. They really would. They would get in trouble for writing a note about me and stuff like that. So it was something.
That's not much fun.
The early days of rock and roll.
Being under the microscope like that, that's not much fun.
Yeah.
No.
That was really crazy.
Well, you did replace Emmett, like you said. Did you may have seen my chat with Jim Valley, who was in Paul Revere and the Raiders. it was in July. I did that.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of Paul Revere and the Raiders, what happened when the band appeared on Where the Action Is?
Yeah, that was crazy. I wish that they would have had that part of it. But part of the show was we were going to do a bit with the Patriot, American Patriot blue, and we're the British in our red jackets, and we were going to have a tug of war up front of the drum stage. And it would have been perfect, except for the fact that there was only black and white TV at the time.
Yeah.
Nobody got it, but it looked great on a live stage, and those guys were really funny.
Yeah.
A great group. I love those guys.
Yeah.
And they played once in a while at the Whole Blue, and Where the Action Is was only there that one day because they wanted to use the venue. And they were at the beach sometimes, they were all over the place when they filmed that show. And the Guard was playing a lot of different shows. We played Chivalry and not Shindig, but Night Street West. There was a bunch of TV shows that we did. One show we did, Sonny and Cher was on the show with us.
Oh, okay.
And we were on scaffolding, back in the day, the camera would come on and here's Sonny and Cher, and here's the Palace Guard, and they would move the camera around scaffolding, and we'd be up in the air somewhere. And it was there's Sonny and Cher below us, her in her long bell bottoms.
Yeah.
And Sonny in his big ape costume, and it was really wild later on to think about, that experience happening on TV with those guys. And how big they became after that. But it was really there were some wild shows back in those days.
Those were all recorded live too. It wasn't lip synced, right?
Lip syncing mostly to the hit record.
Okay.
There were some shows that were live, but we weren't playing live at the time. They would take your hit record and whatever it might be, and the people wanted to hear your hit record because that's what they're used to. You call it a hit. It was basically anything to play on a record on the radio was a hit to people.
That's right.
They really didn't figure that whole thing out for a while about which number one. Until they started pushing it. The DJ started pushing it.
Right.
But Falling Sugar was our song at the time, and that's what we did on that video that you see Where the Action Is.
And it's still up on still up on YouTube.
Yeah, I can still see it. Somebody told me about it. I said, no way, that can't not be there. And I was shocked to see it.
Yeah. And it did quite well. Falling Sugar. It did well.
Yeah. And we kept on recording after that. We did Saturday's Child, but our version was sort of preempted by the Monkees, who came out with it the day before we did. And we thought, well, that was great timing. The guy gave it to us. It was a guy that was writing for us.
Right.
Was shooting his songs everywhere, and they picked up on it. And their version was totally different from ours, but ours had a bunch of harmony in it. But that sort of shut that whole thing down, which I thought it would have been good for the Guard to continue on to have a song that was played on the radio.
Yeah.
They didn't pick up on any of the rest of it, so it sort of shot us down a little bit, not having another sort of popular song.
There you go.
That the radios were playing at the time.
Giving you a little bit more attraction. Well, I just talked to Diane Hildebrand. Do you remember that name? She wrote for Screen Gems, wrote for the Monkees, and co-wrote. But then she also wrote later on for like the Flying Nun, the theme song for that. Do you remember that? And and then what was the other? Oh, the Partridge Family.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Co-writing. She had her own album too, as well. She had an album in the late '60s. But interesting to hear those stories. Oh, let me ask you, how long were you in the band Sweet Wine?
The Sweet Wine was about a year and a half. I was ended up doing the Strawberry alarm clock thing, or Strawberry SAC thing, right in the middle of that time period. 66, 67, 68. There was a bunch of things all happening in that one time period. Sweet One was great because a bunch of guys that were just street kids that became real successful after that. James Rolliston, the bass player,
Yeah.
you know, it was with Steely Dan, Seals and Crofts,
Yes.
Dirk Hamilton, John Hyatt. He played with a lot of people, and he was just a tremendous bass player and singer too. And our guitar player Victor became Wolf Marshall. Wolf Marshall didn't do the band thing that much, but he toured as Wolf Marshall, teaching you about guitars and modality of the different modes that guitar players would play in. For instance, he would make tapes where he's sitting on a stool with Van Halen or you know, somebody like that, and he would be talking about what scale that they were playing in, their lead solos or whatever, and how it relates to history, you know, and where the mode came from. And he would get in depth of about just about anything.
Yeah.
So he was an expert guitar player. He would play the Beatles or back then we were playing Cream.
Yeah.
And he was a Clapton fan, so he would play Clapton note for note.
Oh,
and
wow.
he would learn it right away.
Yeah.
You know, he'd just listen to it and he'd play it.
Yeah.
Amazing guy. And so we were playing with those guys and playing Cream and Buffalo Springfield. Once in a while, we try to throw Beatles on in there. It didn't really work, but we were playing the Gazzarri's on the Strip, and back in those days, the whiskey you couldn't really play the whiskey unless you were a signed group and had an album out. We did not, so we were playing the local clubs the best we could to survive. It made it difficult to keep going because once they got tired of you at Gazzarri's, they had a million other bands that wanted to come in. So
Right.
you were gone, and usually that was the end of it. But like I said, those guys went on to do amazing things.
Yeah. Well, tell us a story with Strawberry. You said Strawberry SAC. It's not SAC. It's SAC.
It was
Yeah.
a lot of guys. We had the original singer from the Did Incense and Peppermints, Greg Mumford, and he was being managed now by the Strawberry Alarm Clock manager, Bill Holmes. So they wanted to put a band around him and be the new Strawberry Alarm Clock because he was basically the voice of the alarm clock. And they thought it'd be a great idea. The real alarm clock wasn't playing at the time. So they tried to now, since they had Greg, to write a follow-up to Incense and Peppermints. And so we did In Relation to Our Times.
Okay.
Was the Strawberry SAC song that was a follow-up to Incense and Peppermints. So we did that, and we started recording a bunch of other tunes once we got other guys in the band. And we went to Original Sound on the Strip, and we played about 8 or 10 songs, or recorded about 8 or 10 songs, and then we waited for something to happen. They were talking about a bunch of stuff. So they had us playing on some TV shows as the alarm clock, those same shows that was Sonny and Cher. And we would play high schools and stuff like that. Casey Kasem was doing rock shows at the time, so we would play with him, and it was real popular. It was a lot of fun until we got a notice to cease and desist from the original alarm clock.
Okay.
You're not the alarm clock, we're the alarm clock.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'd already recorded this stuff, so we released In Relation Strawberry SAC because a lot of their fans called the alarm clock SAC.
Oh, Strawberry Alarm Clock. Gotcha.
Yes. So we went Strawberry SAC just to try to get a little bit of that thing that they had going.
Right.
And but it was over pretty quick once they put the injunction against us because we couldn't do any more shows, and so that was it. But they ended up taking those tracks and a couple other tracks that Greg had done with another band and released it later on as the Crystal Circus.
Crystal Circus. Right. Who came up with that name?
I think probably Bill Holmes, because he you know he didn't really, he had a whole concept, artistic front end with no pictures of the band or anything, and I think he just wanted to make some money. What he had done, couldn't do anything with the rest of it as Strawberry Alarm Clock, so he went and came up with this new idea, and it was really expensive collector's item now. I couldn't believe it. They were getting about $1,000 for this stupid CD. You know, what? You kidding me? Yeah, on eBay. And I said, well, that's nice to know, because I got a few of them myself, you know.
Yeah. Well, I like the cover. I really like.
Yeah, me too. I liked it too.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a psychedelic album, you know, the stuff that he did with his old band, and then the stuff that we did sort of intermingled in there, which was more pop rock. And yeah, it was kind of fun. That was a lot of fun playing with Greg. He's a good singer and a good guy. I think he got into politics. He moved. I think he moved to Washington D.C. and was some kind of representative out there or something. So he, you know,
yeah, wasn't one of the guitarists from Strawberry Alarm Clock? Didn't he join Leonard Skinner at one point? Did you?
The original, the original Alarm Clock had a guy that was Mark, I think, from the. Yeah, but he was on the definitely was in the Alarm Clock and joined Leonard Skinner right after that. Yeah, you're right about that.
Right.
That's a funny guy. I can't remember his name, but
a little heavy set.
Yeah, heavy set. Yeah, funny hairdo.
Yeah,
and yeah, those guys were good too. Leonard Skinner.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah,
right there. Yeah. Well, interesting. You were in the band Jamme. The 1970 album produced by John Phillips of Mamas and Papas fame.
Yeah.
I had reached out to Don 80 a while back about having a chat, and it just never came to be. It never materialized. We corresponded back and forth a little bit, and I think he's driving either Uber or a taxi or something.
Yeah, Uber. I think he's doing Uber.
Okay.
Something like that.
Uber. It is Uber. Yeah. So that just never came to be. But as I showed you earlier, you held up your vinyl copy. I have my CD copy.
I like that one better.
Yeah, of course, because they finally gave you credit.
Yeah, that's a whole other 9 yards. John Phillips thing.
This is and I want to hear about that. But first, this is you right here, isn't it? Okay. You know who I was racking my brain for a little bit, thinking, who does that look like? What other artist does that look like? Mm-hmm. You know who I think it looks like? Who? Jay Ferguson. Jay Ferguson.
Okay.
Have you ever been told that, or maybe back during this time?
I get a lot of comments that I look like a Beatle or something back in those days.
This one, I think, because you got a mustache a little bit right there, and Spirit and JoJo Gunn, his own solo material. So
I had that look. I don't know, that got me in a lot of bands. That look,
Okay.
Because they were wanted a drummer, but they wanted somebody to look like they belonged in the band too, for the photos,
Right,
so it was good to have some kind of look anyway. Yeah. But John Phillips, that whole thing happened because Paul Downing was recording with the Mamas and Papas all the time, and was on a lot of his albums, and they mentioned that I should say, Paul mentioned that he was looking to put a band together, and they said, well, hey, if you want to put something together, we'll be glad to listen to it, So with that, he went out and started looking for people. He knew Don 80 from Churchill Downs. Churchill Downs played along with us with Sweet Wine at Kazari's, of course. And so he grabbed up Don. Don 80 was a fellow Englishman like Paul was. And so they related on that level. Paul went and a new guy from the old days, and Timmy Smizer, and got him as a bass player. And of course, Don knew me from Sweet Wine, so he suggested that I play drums from that, because I wasn't doing anything at the time. And so, the four of us got together and started, banging it out, seeing what we could come up with. We wrote a song called Strawberry Jam Man, which was the original sort of thing to put us, that was gonna be our single, and we're gonna try to work on from that point. We didn't know how crazy he was gonna get with John, because, he's such a harmony guy that he took those things and just sent them into outer space with his concepts that he would see. I mean, he's such a creative guy.
Yeah.
And he would have all these vocal parts in his head, and he would sing this, sing that, and we'll do this, do that, and you could hear the Mamas and Papas influence in that album.
Right.
If you know what to listen for.
Right.
And yeah, so anyway, so we go to his house, the big mansion right across from the what used to be the Beverly Hillbillies, the TV show mansion. Remember that mansion that they show as they drive up?
Yeah.
That house, that giant mansion, was right across the street from John's house in Bel Air.
Yeah.
So we drove past that every day. And you go into this, it was like a big Tudor mansion, you looked like it looked like you were in England when you were there. And they had peacocks walking around, it was so, I mean, he was so on top of it. He was like the man in Hollywood at the time. And we go in there and we're trying to play this Strawberry Jam Man song, and he goes, "Oh, that's tight, great, love it." We're really okay, yeah. So he says, "Yeah, let's put these guys together and bring them over to Lou Adler's house." Lou Adler,
right,
Terry Melcher, and John Phillips in the same room, saying, "Hey, this group is going to be great. It's going to be the next Beatles," and we're really hyping it up. All of a sudden, we're going, "What, really?" It's like a beginning of a whole new career, and it's going to be huge. We think, because with those guys, anything that those guys touch turned to gold. So it's
it turned to gold. You're right. You're right.
And as a musician, you're always looking to get in touch with the right guy. The right guy that can get you to the next level. Talk about having a trifecta right there in front of you. And so we thought this was going to be amazing. So, as far as the recordings, I love the recordings. Although the social part of it became an issue, because we were in the house every day or every other day. And Michelle had a thing going with a lot of people during that period. John was really super jealous of Michelle, and Michelle played it to the hilt, made him even more jealous by, coming on and grabbing people by the neck, and John would get crazy, and they bought us, they didn't buy us, they rented us a house up in Laurel Canyon. They let us use their cars. They had an E-Type Jag, which everybody loved, the E-Type. And they had a mini moke, little mini that we used to drive around. So we had those two cars. We had the house paid for, and he was paying the rent. Coming to his place, and it was a pretty wild scene, because just about every major star in the world would come by John's house at one time or another. And so you'd be in front of anybody, including the Stones, George Harrison, all kinds of different actresses and actors would be there, so at one point we were, he had this room, let's go back a little bit. He had this room that was below the recording studio, which was in the A-frame part of his Tudor mansion. Totally illegal, by the way, up in this A-frame. So that's why he hid it from people. You didn't see the studio when you went into his house unless you knew what to do. And there was a stairwell that went up to the second floor, and then there was this wooden wall that, if you knew where to hit it, underneath there was a button, and the wall would separate and then open. And there was a room that you would go into, and it was sort of a waiting room below the studio, where people were with the wives or whatever, people that were just visiting would just hang out there. Well, a lot of psychedelics were being taken back in those days, so if you were in that room and you closed the doors back up, it was your environment for as long as you wanted to have it. Because there
Yeah.
was no windows. So
Okay.
it could be dark, it could be blacked out, or it could have cool lighting in there.
Yeah.
For as many hours as you wanted to be there, which could be days back in those days. So, you know, I was sitting down there waiting for them. They were doing some harmony parts upstairs. And it was totally black in this room, just about, except for one little crystal light or something. And I'm down there with Michelle and Mia Farrow
Oh, okay. Yeah.
at the time was her best friend. So we decided to drop acid,
Okay.
which was a crazy idea. But, you know, because you don't know how long you're gonna be blasted, and I didn't know if I was gonna have to go back upstairs, and I definitely wasn't gonna be singing. And so we ended up with our heads together underneath the tape, with our heads together, sort of like the Beatles shot, the four heads together.
Right.
And the three of us, and we're talking about, oh, why don't we go to Europe? Why don't we go to France right now? You know, and I'm like, what? And these are the kind of people that could just do that if they wanted to, you know, totally insane money in that world.
Yeah.
And so I'm like thinking, well, yeah, are you guys kidding? You know? And they're saying, no, we're going, we're gonna go, let's do it, you know, and they're getting all excited about it. It was just sort of a fantasy because we were all coming on heavy. And it was like a fantasy trip that we were on at that moment.
Right.
And then they were talking about what are the sleeping arrangements going to be, you know, well, who's gonna be what, you know?
Right.
And I'm thinking, oh shit, you know, I'm only 18, you know? And I'm in the middle of this scene, you know, which is the
Right.
heaviest scene I've ever been involved in,
Yeah.
as far as potential for making it big. And now all of a sudden I'm in here with his wife, big movie star, you know,
Yeah.
on acid. And I'm going, well, you know, what if John was here? You know, you wouldn't be talking like this. And all of a sudden the lights go on and there's John standing there saying, I am here. He didn't like the conversation we were having at all.
He heard it. Oh,
Yeah, and that was the end of me.
oh,
That was it for me.
wow.
Yeah,
After that, yeah.
yeah, that was it. Because even though I was saying, hey, John, come on, are you kidding me?
Right.
I'm not coming out of your wife. I'm not looking to get laid or whatever.
No, we're getting ready to take a flight to France. You know?
Yeah, I couldn't explain that. Could not explain that. And you know, it was basically because he didn't trust her. Didn't matter about me. What my innocence didn't even matter in this, except I had to be gone.
Yeah, right.
That was for sure.
Oh,
That English look that got me in the band, now was getting me out of the band.
Now it was getting you out of the band. Well, I was going to say on that album though, there's some nice tracks on there.
Oh yeah.
I have another YouTube channel where I just post songs from various artists. And I posted "Poor Widow." Do you remember "Poor Widow"?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah. On there, that's one that I really like.
she's all alone. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And got a few views on there, so it's always interesting again to see the comments and that kind of thing. Well, why was it because of that incident that you, Paul and Timmy, were given credit on the original album?
Yes, because it wasn't just me that was about to be.
Okay.
For one other reasons, it came down the pike. During that time, they were auditioning other drummers to come in and play, and it became an issue with the other guys. They didn't like the way Timmy was playing bass now all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Some of these drummers were commenting about it, and you know, and so they wanted to bring in other bass players, and Timmy wasn't having it, and it became a problem. So all of a sudden, with like John, just like me, he makes a rash decision. He's out. And Paul was going, wait a minute, that's one of my best friends. What are you doing? You're tearing apart the band.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you're out too then. You want to go? You go too. So Paul said, okay, I'm going. So Paul and Timmy both left.
Right.
Just because of some stupid disagreement at the time, you know, and Don 80 was the only one left. And that sort of thing just folded, I think, for a long time, until all of a sudden Don got a call saying, come to the house, we're gonna take some pictures. And that ended up being the album picture.
Yeah.
And with his brother Keith. And Keith had evidently done some overdubs playing bass. To redo some of Timmy's bass parts, I guess. And next thing you know, they released it as a jam, with just the two of them on the cover, and didn't mention us at all, which was really sad for me and the other guys, that had played on it. So it took a while before they came around and did the CD and actually gave us credit. It was like, wow,
2010,
for all these years.
on Now Sounds. Well, how did John justify that? I mean, there were musicians playing on that. How did he justify? Did he say it was a studio band, or what did he
Yeah, I
say?
mean, we were just kids trying to do our best to live up to what he expected of us. And a lot of the times he would be in there telling you what to play or telling you how to feel it. He was even telling me what to play. Like Strawberry Jam has got some crazy arrangement on it.
Right.
And it wasn't certainly something I would have done. But with his vision of where he wanted to put the harmonies and the arrangement of the whole thing, he would try to sort of push me in this direction or that direction. Yeah. And he had I don't know, he had such a weird attitude about things. And they had to be perfect, and they needed to be done pretty quickly. So he might get frustrated if things weren't going right away. So that was one of his issues that he had. I think there might have been other things in his life that were probably causing that to happen. And so, it was just the way it was. He didn't have to rationalize it to us. It was do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah.
And it was sad because I thought it had some really cool tracks on it, like you said.
Yeah.
Something could have happened with those tracks.
Right.
If anybody was ever to hear them, to say we're never really released. They had, Dunhill Records was letting John have his own label, Warlock, came out on Warlock. But there wasn't no big distribution or big deal about the band or anything like that. I think
go ahead. Sorry.
I think he used it. There was a I think there was a movie, I forget what it was, that they used some of the songs, and there was a bunch of money fronted to John from that. And I think, a couple of guys from the band maybe made some money on that, but there was no push for the band at all. I think they just wanted to get it done and get it over with. I think it was sort of the end of the Mamas and Papas too, in a lot of ways. Because not too long after that, they broke with John and broke out, and it was I should say Michelle broke up with him. And so I think that was just we were just part of what was happening in John's life, unfortunately. And we went from all this promise in the world to the whole thing just falling apart at the seams. It's just like so many other rock and roll stories that you hear about. And it was sort of like that with the Hollywood stars too. I mean, we had the same issue of having a lot of bad luck. The wrong thing is happening in history just at the moment where you're about to do something.
Right.
And the whole thing with Columbia, all the A&R guys here on the West Coast got replaced. Those were our connections to do the album, and we got kicked off that Columbia album deal right off the bat, along with a lot of other artists.
Right. Timing and luck, like you said. I mean,
it
has so much to do with everything.
Yeah, because we had finished we were working with Harry Maslin, and we were supposed to get this album finished, and been told just the day before that we were ahead of the budget, that we were on time and we were going to get done And things were looking good. And then the next thing we hear is that the band is no longer signed to the label. It's been dropped. And it's like, what? We didn't even get a chance to get to sing out.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're gone, you know? And the money stops, you know, everybody gets paranoid and, you know, it runs for the hills, and the band is trying to keep it together, but, you know, without financial backing, it's a drag, because they were paying for our everything at the time, for our rehearsal, they're paying for our apartments and stuff. And, you know, where are you gonna get the money for your apartment? You got rent too, you know?
Right.
You're trying to keep it together, but if they're not gonna help, you gotta run, you gotta go and find something else.
Right.
Either a straight job, or you're gonna find another band that's got money.
Yeah.
So it was a tough thing at that moment, because we thought it had potential. So we all broke up and went our separate ways, and Fowley had now it was about a $40,000 demo tape to shop around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was our album.
Yeah.
And then he went around, and of course he was lucky, he got involved with KISS, and
Oh yeah. I wanted to show you this too. Picked this up not too long ago.
That's amazing.
Impossible but true. Kim Fowley's story, and it's his recordings, stuff that he produced and worked with during the '60s. So
When did you get that? Is that available now?
This is this is from Ace Records UK. I picked it up at a used record CD store. That's where I find so much of my stuff. There's one nearby. 2003 is when it came out. But it's got stuff on here like the Hollywood Argyles, Kim Fowley's own material, Cat Stevens, Portobello Road, that he produced, Gary Paxton, Paul Revere's on here, Like Long Hair, Belfast Gypsies, Van Morrison, the offshoot.
That's something to do with that?
Yeah, he's involved with so many of these, the Seeds.
Seeds, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Gene Vincent, Rainbow at Midnight, Soft Machine, the Rivingtons. So there's and this is all like in the '60s, during the '60s. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was all over the place.
So I like picking up a lot of these various artists and collections. That's how I found out about a lot of bands, you know, through picking those up. Well,
I'd like to get that one.
yeah,
to check that out.
Yeah, it's got a really nice booklet. You know, I mean, I don't know how many pages this thing is, but it goes into great detail on all of them, and you know, just his story, you know, about Kim Fowley. It's kind of a bio about him, you know, his early days, and idiosyncratic individual. Yeah. You know, yeah, you got to meet
him. I used to hang with him and back in the day.
You got to meet with him. Yeah. Well, you did play in the Flamin' Groovies, one of my all-time favorite bands. Shake Some Action. You played on the demo of that.
And the one I heard your name was the other one. We did two songs, and Capital, which was a big fantasy of the Groovies and of mine, to be able to be in a room that maybe the Beatles had been in.
Right.
For sure, they were there for interviews all the time back in the day. Remember seeing the Beatles show up at Capitol. We were out there in the parking lot waiting for them to show up. Of course, you know.
Yeah. Right.
And they had a car over here, and then the Brinks armored car rolls up over here, and that opens up, and they run right by us. We were so far away from where we thought they were going to be. Yeah. They pulled a ploy for like a football game. It was, look over here, and then I'm going to run over here. You're over there. And they ran right by us. It was amazing to see it. So all of a sudden we're at Capitol Studios with some of the, you know, we rehearsed this Shake Some Action thing, and then we just sort of jammed it. Yeah. And you can tell it's different than their single eventually became, but I like the way it was sort of a natural thing the way we just naturally played it together, how you would as a rock band.
Right.
You know, with an extra long solo and maybe
Yeah.
wasn't perfect and all that stuff, you know, I really liked it. And then the other one, sort of a combination of drum beats that I'd heard in the past, a little bit of Bo Diddley in there. And Mona from the Rolling Stones.
Oh,
Boom,
right.
boom, 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 you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
So, yeah, so I put those two tracks together and it had a nice feel for it when I heard your name. And so I thought that was gonna be happening. I mean, I love the Groovies, you know, we all went up to Granny Takes a Trip and got our jackets there, which were all from England, you know, and
Yeah.
velvet jackets with, you know, multicolors on them. Amazing. And so we all had a cool mod look. And it took me a while to get in there because you know, they had just lost their drummer and they didn't know anybody at the time. And Kim Fowley originally introduced me to those guys, and they came down to LA and they were hanging out with a friend of mine and a friend of everybody's, Michelle Myers at the time. She was booking the Starwood and Social Butterfly, you know, and so she got us together and we hung out at her house and talked and we had a great time. So I went back, took pictures with the Groovies and it looked like it was all gonna be happening. And but then the whole thing about moving to San Francisco now would be the next phase, which was like, yeah, that's a little bit more difficult than I thought. I have all my stuff here, including a couple of drum sets.
Right.
And you know, they weren't gonna pay me. I was gonna have to live with Cyril's mother or something, you know.
Really.
You know, in his, I don't know. So here I'm gonna be like a, you know, homeless guy with two drum sets. And that didn't look like it was gonna work out real great. And then Tim came to me and says, we got this new project. What do you think about an answer to the New York Dolls, the Do with Stars? I said, well, that's a wild idea. You know, having a group that sort of related to a city like the Dolls did.
Yeah.
And especially with Kim involved, you know, I mean, he had all the connections to make that happen and had the street validity and all that. Back in the day, we had to put posters up on poles to advertise. There wasn't any internet. So it was all word of mouth, you know, it was on the street kind of thing. And he was really good at that. You know, you'd be hanging out with Kim and he'd walk into a room of people at the whiskey or something. And he would say, Timmy Ray. And it was just, it's like, what do I do? You know, the new drummer for my band. It's like, oh, he started his rap, you know, and everybody would be, no shit, really? And they'd come around and they would write into it with him, you know. And if you were into it, he would like,
Yeah, right.
he'd be out the door, you know. It's like, so he was really tough that way. You don't want to be on the wrong side of Kim,
right,
in that scenario.
He could be an imposing figure. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so you know, he was going teenage, you know, he would yell teenage. And you know, you were gonna be the next thing, and he was telling everybody what it was gonna be, and you guys gotta come to Studio Instrument Rentals, we're gonna be playing next week. Come see us.
Yeah.
And he did that all down the strip.
Yeah.
He would just pull us along with him.
Well, you were the second one recruited. Who else was in the band, the original band?
Well, initially, I think Scott was initially the first guy because he had met him at Rodney's. Knew about his arrest when he was playing back in Midwest somewhere. I think it was when he got arrested for indecent exposure or something on stage, and that sounds right up his alley. And
I was going to say
this
that's somebody I want somebody like that.
It's gonna be another Iggy Pop, you know.
Right.
So they grabbed Scott up and brought him to Hollywood, and then the rest of it was like Mark Anthony was at the time driving him around, so Mark Anthony was sort of in the background at that time. he knew a guy named Gary that was the bass player. So Gary became the bass player, and they pulled me from the Groovies, and because I couldn't stay with the Groovies, so I had to make that change. And then I had been playing when I first came back from Santa Cruz with the guy with Ruben De Fuentes, and he was such a good guitar player. Since they were looking for somebody, he said, "Let's try Ruben. You know, bring him over. Let's see what he can do." You know, of course, he just ripped it up, and everybody loved Ruben. So there you go. You had the band right there, and we started rehearsing at what was they called the Egg Carton Studio, which was some really desolate room in the middle of Burbank
Yeah.
with old egg cartons stapled to the wall as soundproofing.
Yeah.
Really a depressing situation,
Oh,
but here we were. But when Kim was in the room, it was magic. So he would give us direction and
you
play a little bit
imagine?
more like Keith, or play a little bit more like I don't know, David Bowie, and
Yeah.
he would just sort of give us directions, theoretical directions, and then we would try to pick up on where he was wanting us to go,
Right.
and we'd come up with some songs, and so it was working out pretty well. It was pretty cool, and everybody wanted to sign us. We decided to go with Columbia, not knowing that was the worst thing we could have done. Of all the other labels that were out there, we picked a big one because they were the one with the most promise and everything,
Yeah.
the most money.
Right.
And, so that's the way that goes. You never know.
But you didn't know that
Kim had
what was going on with Columbia at that time. You didn't know that at that time.
Yeah, we didn't know. I mean, it was going to be the whole thing about payola, saying was a real problem with the studios at the time. A lot of people got shut down or got busted, and then changed a lot of people's careers at the time. Changed the music industry.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was there, and he had this demo tape, which we had now given him, with King of the Nighttime World on it, Escape, and a bunch of other stuff. And so he went around looking for bands that might be interested in those songs to redo, do it with their own thing, and he got some bites on a couple of songs, and it became one of their like kisses. This song would be the first song they play. It would be their opening song, King of the Nighttime World. It was getting a lot of press, and the Destroyer album, and all of a sudden the guys were saying, we're all doing different things, but like, why don't we put the band back together? Since we got all this cachet now, we can maybe ring up another label and say, hey, here we are again. But we couldn't do anything with these songs, but we got new songs, and we got some kind of validity because of this. And then we went looking for labels again, and we ended up on Arista after all.
Right. I was going to say the first official release on Arista, the eponymous album. How did that album fare? Do you remember?
Well, Clive he was a problem because Clive had ideas of his own, and we were I think at Island Studios, and we had basic tracks, and he was bringing in orchestration, but he had a full orchestra in there sometimes, and we weren't Bread or one of those bands. I mean, we were just we're still basic kids knocking it out. We're just street urchins with a drumstick, and we weren't so sophisticated that you could throw all this stuff on it and make it make any sense, but that's what he thought we should be. He wanted to.
The big.
So he didn't understand the band at all.
Right.
So you have a mishmash of rock and strings on this thing, and at the last minute we had some pictures taken and we're going to be the album cover. At the last minute, Mark said he didn't like it, and we ended up standing in front of the whiskey
There it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
And we
that's
took that shot, and
that.
that became the album
Yeah,
cover. So that was,
that's
but we had
that's an
this.
iconic. That's an iconic cover. I remember that one at the time too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We have some concept stuff from Moshe Bracha, and he was a really well-known photographer at the time. He was doing a lot of different album covers. Would have been neat to have his concept. He had an idea of taking snapshots of each individual member and lining them up against the edge of a pool.
Oh,
And then somebody splashes water, and water splashes over them, and that picture of the water splashing over the band in the pool was gonna be the album cover.
it was going to be the cover.
This is the one that they poo-pooed at the last second. I thought it was kind of creative, you know. But you know, we ended up with, you know, looking like we did in front of the whiskey and with 2 minutes notice.
Pretty spontaneous, yeah.
Yeah, it was. Grab whatever you got going and meet us out front there.
Well, you toured with label mates, the Kinks. You did, and that one of my all-time favorite bands.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And traveling with those guys was great. They were nice. As much as you could be nice in that scenario where you're playing and on tour. And they had their own problems with their band, and they're arguing and fighting all the time anyway. So
That was
anything other
the
than a fight was
right.
nice.
Right. I
For
was
those
gonna say
guys.
that was the Sleepwalker. That was the Sleepwalker tour, wasn't it?
That's right, Sleepwalker.
Okay, yeah. I
Yeah.
saw them a little later. Remember the double live album that came out? I guess it was 80, 79, 80. Maybe it was the next release or a couple of years later. The double. Yeah, that's when I saw. That's when I saw.
And it was great to hear them play their set, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
We had to set up in front of them, which was tough. And we had the lesser PA system and lighting.
Yeah.
So, you know, we were still being treated like the opening act always was back in those days, which was a lot less than the main act. And
Right.
we didn't have our own people like they did. We were sort of at their mercy.
At their mercy, yeah. Well, I was going to suggest mention too that the first Shine Like a Radio that was recorded in '74, but it came out on last summer, Light in the Attic in 2013. So at least it was released. You know, again.
And that's another one that they did a nice job on that because they did this whole inside cutout. A lot of photos and stuff.
Yes, that is a good job on that.
Yeah.
I like, yeah.
And that whole thing came to be just because we had I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about the Flaming Groovies. It was Robin Wills. You know, Robin played with the Groovies for a while and Barracudas.
Yes, Barracudas, yeah.
Yeah. And so he was talking about something with somebody chimed in about the demo version. There's so many versions of Shakes and Action. Which one is it? You know, who played on it? And he goes, oh, I think it was the original drummer played on that version. So I'm listening. I chime in. I think it was Terry Ray. You know. Oh, that's right. That's right. Terry Ray from Hollywood Stars. And he goes, thank you. I go, no problem. All right, I decided Terry, and he goes, hey, are you Terry? Yeah. No shit, really. And the first thing he asked me, is there any tapes that you have that you never released?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, we got tapes. We got plenty of tapes. Got tapes everywhere. So he said, no shit. Well, I got an idea. I really want to do something with you guys. And just from that chance thing, where I chimed in and said something about something that somebody else said, started this whole thing going, where we ended up with this beautiful compilation album.
Right.
And wow, you know, it just came out of the blue.
Yeah. You never know how things will get started like that, you know.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? Yeah. You know,
but we had to take I think we had to remaster some of the stuff. We sent the tapes to England and They were
Yeah.
playing with the frequencies, and because it was in, old tapes and stuff that we had laying around, like falling apart tapes,
Right,
reel to reels,
right, right,
back then.
right.
So-
Well, now I'll ask you again, you still have any songs in the vaults that haven't been released?
No, I think the last thing that we put together was, that was in the vaults was, Sound City.
Sound City, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sound City was to, all the stuff we did with Neil Merriweather
Neil Merriweather, yeah.
from the Space Rangers.
Right. Canadian.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So he would see us play at the Starwood, and he approached us and said he wanted to produce us. And he had some ideas that he thought would be great for us, and so we ended up going to various studios and recording tracks. And then when we got the Arista deal, we thought that Merriweather was going to be our producer, because we'd already had a nightmare with other deals that we had done.
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, this guy we know, this
Right.
guy's not going to bring in an orchestra, and everything's already done.
Yeah.
So we know we can't go wrong here. We got the thing already packaged. Here you go.
Yeah.
No, not so much. No, we didn't like Neil Merriweather. He's kind of a wacko,
Oh,
just like they didn't like Kim Fowley when we got signed.
yeah.
And that became an issue with Kim being involved. This time it was Merriweather. They didn't
Wow.
they didn't want to have Merriweather associated. They wanted to bring in their own guys.
Wow.
So,
Did you ever start thinking you were a magnet for these guys?
I think we were shit magnet. Yeah. If anything, that was it. I don't know why we kept going, there were so many crazy things happening. But we almost managed to get some kind of deal which kept us going.
Yeah.
So with that, we had, now we had a nice tape, but they didn't want to use any of the tracks. I think they used one of them, Make It to the Party, I think they used on that album, but, and all the rest of it was poo-poo. They said, no, never mind. So we had to go back in the studio and record new stuff, which wasn't exactly rock and roll, but Mark had already evolved past this point. Now he was writing love songs for some odd reason. And maybe because he had no love in his life, he was writing love songs, I don't know. But he certainly wasn't getting any love from the music industry, or not much anyway. But he was writing new stuff, and so we had to go in the studio, and that ended up being the problem child that was the orchestration, and not being Terry Maslin and all that, who did the Bay City Rollers after us, if you can imagine. So this was released with all the Merriweather tracks on here, which were different versions of Habits and Escape. And so there's some cool stuff on that. I don't know if you can see that, but there's some cool songs on there.
Hold it up a little closer. There you go. A little higher. There you go. Yeah. There we go. I think we can read those.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So we ended up doing that in vinyl. Whoops, drumsticks everywhere. Nice to just get that out there, just we did the CD first, that was out earlier, but it was nice to get it in vinyl recently. So we have that now for our collection of people that really get confused of what album went where.
Right. Well, you guys initially broke up, what, 78, late 70s? But that wouldn't be the end for Hollywood Stars. Band would reform in 2018. Who was what prompted that? Who was behind getting back together?
Oh, well, we met at the Rainbow. I think Ruben initially was talking about it. It's still possible that we could do something. So everybody was still around. Mark had unfortunately passed away, so Mark was no longer Mark Anthony. Yeah. But the rest of us were still around. So we thought it'd be fun just to talk about it. So we all met at the Rainbow, and Scott is a world traveler. So it was like, Scott, what do you think about this? Do you think you could actually find room for us in your schedule? He goes, yeah, I think I could. I think, I'll just fly in and do the rehearsals, or plan and do a gig or whatever. So he was going to pay for the rehearsals while he was on the road.
Oh, okay.
which was nice because it actually kept the band going.
Yeah.
And then while that was happening, he would do his trip and then come back to LA and learn whatever he needed to learn and sing with us and get that together on his own schedule.
Yeah.
And that was going to work, we thought. So we started doing that. We put together we had his son who was working at the time, so as a record, a video recorder, producer. So he came in and we did a video. Leg just cramped up when I said that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Bad omen.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're a drummer. You just cramp up spontaneously. But yeah, so we did the video, King of the Nighttime World, out on a racetrack area. It was like being on the moon. So we're out in the field, and so that we thought it'd be fun to have the video out there, and that sort of helped us continue on. We thought we'd start recording and stuff, and we had a couple of other members come in as things changed over that year, and then we had a problem with logistics on things. It wasn't as easy as we thought it was going to be, and next thing you know, we were holding off, and the band wasn't together for a little bit, and then we had people that wanted to handle the band. So we thought, well, we have different ideas coming in. We had Lauren, Lauren from the Dogs. I don't know if you know the Dogs.
Yes.
Yeah, great guy and great guitar player. So he had some friends that he knew. So we brought George in. And so now we had a different group of guys, and Jeff from the Motels was also invited to come and jam with us, see what he thought, and he liked it, and we all got along real well. So we kept going with the new lineup, and it became real easy to do things. The work became more fun than work, and we ended up in the studio, and things went real well. We got stuff done within a week or so, and then we got a new label, and we just said, let's go with this thing, and now here we are, so people are liking the song, so that's always nice. You get a good positive reaction from Starstruck, and so now we don't know what's going to happen, but I know next month.
Heard some good response from fans, and
yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was really into it, and I thought that the music in general was a lot better than what we had done in the past. I love the direction that we ended up going and how everybody played it. And when people started to react and say, wow, this is really cool, I really like it. And it was genuine, they wouldn't pull on your leg, and that's the best thing you can have happen, is somebody just say, yeah, this is good.
Right.
Not just saying that. We really like it. We really like it. And it was, wow, that's really good. Especially the label. You want the label to like it. Yeah. They're out there pushing it, and hopefully something will happen. I know they're playing a lot. There's a lot of downloads. Yeah. Thousands of downloads, which is what you need.
Right.
Especially in, I guess Spain has the most plays. They're playing it actually on their radio stations in Spain, as far as the play side of it, not just download. Yeah. And so that is a possibility of us going there and playing a couple of venues in their vicinity.
Isn't it? I find it fascinating how your music will appeal to different places in different countries. You know, and that's all. It's always
like Japan is a big place to start bands up. It had a rough time here.
Right.
Go there and they get, people are screaming like the Beatles, and all of a sudden you get a whole new look at life.
That's right, and the fans there are really different. Yeah, they adore the musicians, and they'll sit through sound checks, just quiet, you know. That's the stories I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just in rap, you
And
know.
they just clap.
Yeah. And very polite, very polite.
They're not standing up dancing in
Right.
front of everybody like our crowds do.
That's something else. Well,
Well,
good. I'm
you know,
glad.
it's funny, when we were on the road with the Kinks, we were playing Washington and Oregon and then Vancouver. And Washington and Oregon, the crowds were so obnoxious. I can't believe how rough those guys are. I mean, they wanted to see the Kinks and that was it. And I don't know who, they might as well not have had an opening act because people were just like, get the hell off the stage. You know, it was really rough because we weren't well known anyway. And we had a name like the Hollywood Stars.
Did you have chicken wire? Did you have chicken wire?
We should have. It was like playing the Roadhouse.
Right, right. Oh, man.
Yeah. So here we're getting, you know, blizzard with all kinds of comments in between the songs and shit. It was really, really
Man.
something. But then we got to Vancouver.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it was real quiet. And, you know,
Right.
it's like they listened to the song.
Yeah.
They appreciated what you were doing and they applauded, which
Yeah.
was what, you know, you're supposed to do
Right, right.
as an audience, to just checking somebody out. Not
Yeah.
get off the freaking stage. Go back to mama. They,
Yeah,
you know, they
yeah.
didn't like the Hollywood Stars name anyway.
Yeah, right.
There was always they always thought we were
A
gay
version to that.
Hollywood types.
Mhm.
And so, you know, that was rough to get over. I mean, we're trying to let everybody know we were straight and it was just a name that Tim Fowley thought of about the city, and that wasn't really anything else.
Yeah.
And but you know, depending on where you are in the world, you know, they're gonna accept you or not.
That's right.
So that on the road training is really hardcore.
Oh, right, right. I can imagine that. Well, it's good that hopefully it's getting some traction, hopefully. And have you heard from fans back in the day?
Nothing yet. Nothing yet. I mean, most of those guys that I knew are passed away and or we lost track. A lot of them were around, or you know, they had got out of the music business, or they got out of the music scene, and they got married and did other things, and or moved out of town. So yeah, don't see too much of that, but maybe something will happen
Well,
when we get out there.
you're getting a younger audience, a newer audience, and that's
Yeah.
good, you know. So, well, hopefully, like you said, it will continue and pick up. That was what, June that it was released?
I
Was it
think
June?
so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just this
Oh,
that's when the vinyl. Yeah, I mean that's when the CD first came out, I think.
so that's just been a few months ago. So yeah.
Yeah,
Well, so hopefully, hey, that's a good Christmas gift, right? For people.
yeah, very much so. Yeah,
There you
we're
go.
happy to be at my age and with my experience, and all of a sudden we got a new album coming out. I mean, I would never think this would be happening to me. So I'm just glad that I'm still around and we're still kicking, you know?
Right, right. Well, you know, good music's going to travel, and that's one thing I always say. It may take decades for it to come back around, and sometimes longer, but people are going to, you know, grab a hold of it. They're going to follow that, and if it's the kids or the grandkids, sometimes, you know, these fans, you know, yeah,
They can't take it away. I mean, it's there. Even when
Right.
we're all gone, somebody's
Right.
gonna say, who is this band with all these albums, you know,
Right.
that we never heard of?
right. It's recorded, and the same thing with doing interviews like this. You know, it's going to be there. So you know, for future generations, hopefully, and you know, people are gonna, you know, they'll find out about it. People with musical
Hopefully this
taste.
will give us the impetus to go into the studio again and come up with
Right.
some more stuff. Hopefully we just keep going.
Right, right. Let me ask you real quick, how long did it take you to record the Starstruck?
It was only, we did that in a couple of weeks.
Okay, okay.
I mean, we did one track after the next. We had been in rehearsal constantly doing the song. So when we went in the studio, we were right on it.
Okay.
And the way they set it up, we had, everything sounded perfect. So we just went for it and it worked. I mean, it was, and we had ideas for overdubs and harmonies and stuff later on, but the basic tracks went right away. And that's all you need. Once you got a good basic track, you know, you just build on that and you're good to go.
Right. Well, hopefully there'll be more coming from you guys. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
To look forward to. And I appreciate it, Terry. I do.
Yeah, it was good talking to you.
Yeah. And thanks for taking time out to do this and visit and go back in the time machine and all that good stuff. And yeah, I enjoy it. I mean, I enjoy hearing you guys' stories, and I know a lot of people watching the show will too. They enjoy that kind of thing. So
Yeah, well, it was fun.
yeah.
So sort of a natural thing. I like that when people just
Yeah.
talk and let it all hang out.
That's what I want it to be. It's just like a conversation, I know a lot of times when you hear interview, my mind, I think, a job interview. So I immediately start sweating when I think about being put on the spot and asking. So right. I prefer to call it a chat or a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's more what I enjoy.
Yeah, you have an easygoing way about you, which makes it simple.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Somebody said that too. They said it's disarming. And I said, yeah. I don't want the hairs on the back of your neck to start standing up. right. Or
Here we go.
Sticking your finger in a light socket. No, we don't want that to happen. All right, Terry. Well, it has been very, very enjoyable. And I'll give you a copy once I edit a little bit, send it to you, and you can post it on your socials and wherever you like, and let everybody know and see what happens.
All right. Thank you, man.
All right.
Talk to you later.
All right. All the best to you too.
You too.
All right.